Good day, Tim.
Thanks,
I'm here. Can you hear me all?
Yep, over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Well, the title, as you said, says it all. We're going big into lithium in Western Australia. So we made this pivot change on the 10th of March when we announced the acquisition of EV Minerals. It was 9 months in gestation, and our patience and selection of this project has, I believe, pay off, and that'll prove itself as we go forward. In my 10 minutes presentation, I'll outline to you how this is going to transform our company for our shareholders. Next 2 slides, please. So we'll go straight onto the. Thank you. So why lithium and why Western Australia? Let me start with lithium. If you're watching here today, you'll probably appreciate there's a momentum towards the decarbonisation of the global economy. Lithium's key to that. It's the lightest metal, and so where there's a power to weight ratio, specifically in batteries, there's no substitute. There's also consensus that there'll be a demand of about 400,000 tonne per annum of lithium by 2030. For those of you who use lithium carbonate equivalent, that's about just over 2 million tonnes per annum. Now, the graph I've shown on the left there is the supply side. I'll focus on the supply side because, that's what I know about, and that's what we focused on. What you see there is by 2021, global lithium supply reached 100,000 tonnes per annum. And of that, about just over 50% came from Western Australia. The demand by 2030 is for 400,000 tonne per annum of lithium. So that's a 4-fold increase. And the issue really is, where will this come from? That's something all the experts are grappling with, and there's general consensus we're going to struggle to meet that. If you look at our competitors, the Chinese really, while they've increased their production, are constrained by both minerals and by grade. Their mines are declining. The orange shown in that graph is South America, which is primarily Argentina and Chile. While the brines do produce cost-effective lithium, the problem is most of their projects take 9 years gestation from concept to production. So really that leaves Western Australia. As I said, we have produced over 50% of the world's supply. Greenbushes produce about 30% of the world's current production, and they've doubled their capacity with that production coming on stream in 2020. Next slide, please. So we think WA is going to do it. The project we acquired is Tambura. You see that in the bottom right of the slide. We like the Pilbara for a number of reasons. One, it's a tier 1 world-class place to be producing and mining. We have a track record of Wodgina and Pilgangoora, which was acquired by Pilbara Minerals in 2014. That's now an $8 billion company. Wodgina was acquired by MinRes, I think for under $100 million. They repurposed and revisioned that mine as a lithium mine, and a year later they sold that to Albemarle, a 40% share for $1 billion. So this is clearly elephant territory, in a place you can make lots of money if you know what you're doing, and for exploration. I won't go into the details, but essentially in this area, you're looking for what is called LCTs, or lithium, cesium, tantalum deposits. You need to be in the greenstones, and you need close proximity to what are called the split rocks groups, which is what causes the mineralization. The region has only about 4% or less of pegmatites, which is where we find this mineralization or mineralized. So you really have to know what you're doing and where you're looking. A number of vectors really have to line up for that mineralization to be there. The concept and the geological hypothesis is now well understood. And one of the West Australian leading experts in the field is Dr. Marcus Sweetapple. So I contacted him in October last year, and we've been working together. Marcus did his PhD at Wodgina, and then in 2014 was hired by Pilbara Minerals when they started out their exploration at Pilgangoora. Next slide, please. So I took Marcus up soon after we acquired this project for EV Minerals earlier this year. And fortuitously for us, he confirmed the LCT pigmatite model. What you generally find is what we call the Goldilocks zone. So that Goldilocks zone is within 5 to 10 kilometers of contact between the granites and the greenstones. We've got about 31 kilometers of contact here, both on the west and the east side. We have 2 granite systems. We started up in the northwest, where we had previous mineralization from historical reports. We flew up there in February this year to identify and confirm the model. We found high-grade samples, and you'll see some of those results on the right. I flew up with Marcus and the rest of the team a month later. And what we've defined there so far is 3 targets. Bengal was from historical mineralization. We confirmed that with additional rock chip samples. Ragdoll was the first project we went to. And then more recently, Line is a new target, which sits just south of Ragdoll, and again has multiple mineralization. If you look at some of the photographs in the rest of our slide, you'll see the granites there, and you'll see the mineralization in that granite. So the mineralization really starts thin. It comes, its genesis is in the what we call the split rocks pigmatites. It goes through the older granites, and as it gets into the greenstones, it balloons out. So that's what we're targeting. We've only explored 4% of this project so far. We'll mobilize a team next month, having got our tenement finally granted on Tuesday this week. And our plan really is to define which of those targets. I expect that we'll generate a lot more targets in the coming weeks and months, but really we need to define and refine the best place to drill, and we'll start drilling as soon as we can. So that's really the key to our Pilbara project. As you can see there, it's project number 1. We like the Pilbara. The exploration is relatively easy, as most of the mineralization is not transported, not covered by transported cover. Watch the space as we look to add additional projects to our Tambora project. We have 2 other tenements there, which we really haven't started on yet, but we started Tambora because that's where we knew we had mineralization. Next slide, please. So when we go, if you look at our corporate slide, our shareholder, you can see the jump in both volume. We had a bit of a messy shareholder register to tidy up. Most of those 100 million of options have now been exercised. The remainder of those options are currently out of the money. We have just a market cap now of just $37 million, which when you compare us to our peers is still relatively cheap. We have a very supportive shareholder base, which is pretty important as we go through the growth. We've got just over $3 million in tin at the moment. So we're well funded to take the exploration until we're ready for resource drill out. The next slide, please. The board is an experienced board, and most importantly, I think, is the relationships and the experience we have in Western Australia. Most of those in WA will appreciate that access to resources, I'm talking people, geologists, drill rigs, is pretty tough. And our strong relationships and reputation will assist us as we go forward. Next slide, please. So in simple terms, and I'm going to leave as much time for questions as possible, because there's a lot of questions I hope people be asking. So we're in a tier 1 jurisdiction. In very simple terms, we need to grow another 20 green bushes to supply the world's demand in the next 8 years. Our view, and there's general consensus on this, is that the brines will struggle to meet that demand. The Chinese are unable to do it. They simply don't have the mineral resources. WA has doubled its capacity in the last couple of years. There's a lot more lithium pegmatites ore bodies to be found in WA. We have a great number of companies that have gone before us, and I look to companies like Lantern and the sale of Kidman Resources, who have achieved spectacular returns for their investors. So we really like the space. We understand the jurisdiction. We've had a lot of success, and we've been patient and careful so far in the projects we've acquired. We're looking to add to that portfolio as we go forward, and I'm pretty optimistic that we will find one or more tier one lithium projects in the next couple of years to meet what is a very large deficit in the lithium supply. And there is no substitute for lithium when it comes to power to weight ratios in batteries. So that's our story, Tim. Hopefully it makes sense. It's a relatively simple story, and I'd like to take questions.
Thanks, Julian. We've got quite a few questions. Can I start by saying, I think you mentioned you've only kind of drilled 4% of the asset. Can you explain to us what gave you the confidence to kind of pivot from your gold assets into lithium?
Well, fortuitously in Western Australia, the gold occurrences and the pegmatites that are lithium rich occur in the same geology. So from a geological perspective, we had a pretty good understanding of the space. I spent the last 4 years in the EV mineral supply space, so I had a very good understanding of what the demand was. And so we really leveraged our network to look at lithium. At the time, mind you, the lithium prices had still not kicked. They've only really kicked in the last, say, 6 to 9 months. But we were very careful and selective, and we've been looking in that space. And my view is, with the expertise and knowledge we have in how to do exploration efficiently and effective in WA, this is going to be a very, very successful switch for our investors, and so far it has been.
And can you give us a little bit more color on who are some of the other producers out there near your project, and what sort of lessons can you learn from their activity?
Are you talking about the West Australian producers?
Yeah.
So I think, Greenbushes has been a very, very large and consistent supply of both tantalum and, to a lesser extent, lithium for many years. It's a freak of nature in terms of the ore body. It runs 2%, and it's very large. And really, until recent times, there was no real demand for the type of quantities of lithium you've seen. Over the last 2 years, as I mentioned, Pilbara have gone from a small exploration company. They acquired their project, Pilgangura, in 2014. They're now an $8 billion company. MinRes acquired Gems mine up at Wodgina, and have been very successful there. And then more recently, Kidman sold their 50% share to Wesfarmers. That's a joint venture, and they just about to start commissioning there, or are commissioning there now. So, the space, I guess, is hotting up. We've got 2 processing plants currently being built in Western Australia, being commissioned at the moment. So really, there's, my personal view is that the lithium space in the next 8 years will make the iron ore boom here in WA look like it's a Sunday afternoon picnic. It's really going to be that big.
And the tenement agreement you have is for 5 years. Have you got an option to extend that?
Well, that's just the first grant, right? So under WA mining law, you get a 5-year, and then basically it's 5 + 5 or 6 + 6 actually. So we've acquired 100% of Mineral Equities, which is the company that had the tenement. Does that answer your question, Tim?
Yes, it does. And in terms of cash flow, how much drilling can that support in the near term?
Fortunately, the drilling's relatively shallow. So drilling's not very expensive. Once you're in the pegmatites and it's mineralized, it's relatively simple. So our current cash resources should allow us to drill and define and, I guess, determine if these are going to be likely to be economic mineralized pegmatites or not. By the time we get to resource drill out, I guess we'll have to go back to the market, but My view is based on historical precedents that that'll be a materially higher share price than we're currently trading at.
And just finally, Julian, just in terms of time frame, can you give us a best guess of when you think you could get into production?
I'm just going to answer that very simply. Pilbara Minerals at Pilgangoora went from discovery to production in 4 years. Well, that's a good benchmark to, we've only just made discovery at surface. We haven't drilled a hole yet. When we drill that first hole, that indicates we're very likely to have economic mineralization. That's probably a good indicator.
Great, Julian. That's all we have time for. I suspect it might be the last question. There's a rebranding coming through, is there, at some point?
Well, you probably notice I mostly refer to RGL rather than Riversgold. We'll focus our energies and efforts on getting holes into ground and defining resources. We still retain our gold projects around Kalgoorlie. They, remain very exciting, but they primarily sit under a salt lake, and that's expensive.
Understood. Well, thanks, Julian, for your time. Have a nice weekend, and we'll have you back later in the year.
Thank you.